Hey guys, welcome back. It's Morning Sam, Morning Ralph. I'm your host, Paul Molinari with Popcorn GTM. And today we are talking to Scott Siegel. He is the co founder and CRO of Curbit. Curbit is all about kitchen capacity management. And what does that mean? Well, ultimately, that means taking all of those orders that are coming through those different pathways, whether it be through your phone or through a kiosk or at the drive through or through a third party delivery app and throttling and making sense of all those orders and orchestrating them inside of the kitchen so that way food comes out on time every time for guests. Because let's face it, guests have very, very basic expectations. When they order food from you, particularly off premise, they're looking to, when they walk in the door, they want to see their food coming out and being put on a shelf, or better yet, it already being have been there nice and hot and fresh. That's what they want. That's how you keep your promises. Food on time every time. So today, Scott Siegel at Curbit. We start right now.
Morning Sam, morning Ralph, make it pop, make it pop, make it pop.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Scott, it's so great for you to be on the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm terrific, Paul. Thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. I mean, you guys are right on the cutting edge. You know, we've been working together for a little while now, but sometimes for the audience, it would be great if you can let everybody know, how did Curbit start?
The origin goes back several years, actually. Curbit was formed in 2019. And the original concept around Curbit was to democratize the convenience of the drive-through.
Yeah.
So basically what we did is we created a virtual drive-through where a customer could order on the Curbit app, drive into a parking lot, and food was coming right out to their car. And it was spectacular. So we really felt like we were onto something back then. Then the pandemic hit. Pandemic hit in March of 2020, and that changed our product and really restaurant hospitality forever. So the biggest change that we saw then, it was obviously the meteoric rise in digital ordering. So people were now ordering from their mobile device for either pickup or delivery. And the one thing that we were missing that we found is we didn't have any kitchen intelligence to inform people when to actually arrive. We were basing it all off of algorithms. And that's essentially what the problem is today. And we'll get into this later, but that was a real blind spot for Curbit at the time. And so we thought we could get that kitchen data, the prep times, out of the point of sale systems we were working with at the time. And we quickly realized it didn't exist. It was not in the point of sale. So we made a very strategic decision. This is late 2020, to go into the kitchens, develop the integrations with all the major ADS providers to get real-time data that could actually inform guests, drivers, when to arrive, when food should start, and really solving this chronic problem that's crippling the industry today.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that problem a little bit, right? This chronic problem that's crippling the industry today, and quite frankly, really pissing off a lot of guests. And that's, what you guys do is you help restaurant brands kind of keep their promise with their promise times, right? You have omnichannel ordering, which I want to talk about a bit in a bit more detail. But what's happening is you have all of these orders that are coming in. The staff, depending upon how busy they are, there's lots of different outside influences can kind of dictate how well the kitchen is operating at any given moment. Curbit's helping the guests by better understanding when to pick up their food, right?
Yeah. I mean, going back to the pandemic, there was all this innovation around originating orders. So before that, it was, you walked into a restaurant, you ordered at a point of sale, it got routed to the kitchen. It was a very predictable environment. But with omni-channel ordering, you now have this new channel. And not only do you have a new channel, but you have disparate systems. So you have the delivery provider or the digital ordering provider that's originating the order. It gets sent to a point of sale now, and then it just gets routed into the kitchen. So think of it as a one-way street. Orders are just, they're funneling into the point of sale, into the kitchen. The kitchen is the constrained resource. It can only handle so much at one time, particularly at peak hours. With missing, there's no feedback loop. There's no feedback loop in real time going all the way back upstream into that ordering experience. The delivery providers only see the orders they originate. Obviously, they're very good at getting drivers to the destination on time, but the one piece that they're missing is what's happening in the kitchen. They don't see those orders. Same with the digital ordering providers that are originating the orders. So we've become this feedback loop. We've become the real-time feedback loop that can take what's happening in the kitchen, looking at 100% of the orders across all these channels, and creating a very accurate expectation of when a guest or driver should arrive and when that food should be sent into the kitchen.
And so let's talk about then the communication that Curbit is handling. So you just mentioned that you have this omni-channel ordering environment now, what does that mean? That means that you have all of these different ways in which you can place an order now for a restaurant. You can do it on your phones. You can walk in to the store itself, place an order at a kiosk or at the counter, through the drive-through, through a third-party delivery app. You have all of these different ways now that orders are streaming in. And what Curbit is doing is essentially you're like orchestrating these orders. And
we're managing the capacity.
You're managing.
That's really a new category that's been born out of the pandemic. It's kitchen capacity management.
Yeah.
So it starts upstream in the digital ordering channels because that's where you have the most, there's the most variability. You don't know when the guest is going to arrive. And making sure that those orders are starting at the right time is critical to making sure that it's sequenced coming into the point of sale. So, the first step that our first kind of gate that Curbit influences is the actual ordering experience in those digital channels. So what we're doing is throttling. We're helping brands manage the capacity. So rather than somebody in the restaurant making a decision where they say, I think it's too busy right now, I'm going to turn off pick up and deliver. I'm basically turning off revenue. This is a very common thing we hear.
Very common thing, right?
And then, then they have to remember to turn back on. So because we have the integrations, obviously we have the integrations inside the kitchen. That's how we're deriving what the capacity is. We also integrate with the digital ordering provider. So take an Olo, for example, which represents the majority of the enterprise space. Through their APIs, we're able to actually dynamically throttle those orders to make sure that not only the guests are informed with an accurate expectation when they check out, but those orders are being, that there's intelligence around when those orders are actually firing. We remove the sort of the static configuration that brands have to think through when they set up those digital channels of, what's the throttling configuration? What are the make time? It's a lot of thinking and trying to figure out when it's an impossible equation to solve. You
Especially
can't solve what you don't
of
know.
Locations, right? I mean,
What's that?
Every store is different as well.
Every store is different, but if you don't see 100% of the orders, there's no configuration that can predict that. So, that's really the first gate that we influence as we create this cohesiveness between the ordering experience for the guest that tracks what's happening in the kitchen. So that's the first gate. It's making sure that orders are intelligently fired. The guest expectations are managed when they check out. So the time that they see reflects the capacity of the kitchen. That's important because now you're setting that guest off on a course. You're making a promise to that guest. This is when your food will be ready. So you want to make sure you not only deliver on the promise to the guest, but you also want to make sure that you're not overwhelming the staff by sending a bunch of people in at once. So, that's sort of the first gate. Now, as soon as the order gets sent into the kitchen, there's a lot that can happen. That's where we see variability. The food has to be fulfilled. Somebody could leave a prep station. It could get really busy. So that's where you need to have the messaging platform that communicates with the guest in real time, that follows the progress of their order. So imagine being a guest checking out and it's almost like we're putting you in the kitchen. You're actually able to see your order being fulfilled. So you can plan when to get there. So if the kitchen's ahead schedule, behind schedule, whatever it is, we're creating that transparency with the guest to make sure we create that, what we call the happy handoff. We get the guests to the food on time, just as it's coming out of the kitchen.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about how that communication works. So are you communicating to guests with these promise times directly back to their phone? Or is this happening inside of the app they ordered in? Or
Yeah,
explain to me
it's
how that
all through
works.
the first party channel so that they ordered from. So if they ordered, as soon as they check out, they're going to get an SMS powered by Curbit from the location that they ordered at.
Okay.
And then there is a progress via SMS. Now we also have we have an SDK, for example. So a lot of brands like to have the communication within their app. And so we can have the guest checks out. And then instead of the text messaging, they get push notification.
Okay, great.
The
So
nice thing
they
about
have,
text messaging is it's sort of a catch-all. Not everybody's going to be downloading the app for the brand. You're not going to get 100% loyalty. But the nice thing about our service and where we fit in is we can facilitate that. We can facilitate adoption into the loyalty, into the app adoption, because we're providing the user with this very valuable experience, this very reliable journey from the time that they order to the time that they pick up their food. So at the end of that, we can ask them very simply, to enjoy this experience. If to continue enjoying this experience next time, go to store XYZ and here's a link to download their app. And then we can get them we can facilitate adoption into the loyalty.
yeah. So I mean, it's really amazing to me that this problem hasn't been completely eradicated yet in
Yeah.
our industry. But at the
Hard.
same time, listen, we've been in restaurant tech now for a long time, and we know that it's never seemingly easy, frankly, to solve most problems inside of a restaurant, particularly when there's so many moving parts. But when customers order through any channel to a restaurant, their expectations are pretty simple. I mean, they want
Yeah.
to be, right? I mean, they want their food delivered on, they want their food on time and fresh, and whether that be hot or cold or however its intended state was to be. When they pick it
Yeah.
up, that's the way they want it. Um, so explain to me how Curbit does that inside of an existing tech stack. I mean, where do you guys fit in this entire, in a restaurant's technology ecosystem?
Yeah. Think of us as the glue in between all the disparate systems. So, why hasn't this been fixed? Well, there is no one system that a brand can plug in and say, make sure that my guests and make sure that the guests are informed, make sure they get accurate promise times, make sure that the handoff is happy.
Hmm.
There is no one size fits all. Restaurants are very, by nature, brands are different, locations are different. It's very hard to kind of create this cohesion across a brand when you start thinking about hundreds of locations. So that's where Curbit sits into the stack. Is we take all the disparate systems. So think about online ordering, point of sale, KDS. When an order, and we're integrating with all of them. So by integrating, we're getting the data feeds from all those systems. And what we do with that is we create what's called a digital twin. This is the new term that you're starting to hear a
Yeah.
little bit more about. So we take all basically the payloads of every single event, from the time that the order, from the time that it hits the kitchen and it gets bumped from station to station. So we're creating digital twins. We're ingesting all this data into our domain,
Hmm.
and then we're creating outcomes with that. We're creating an expectation for each order, and we're saying, okay, this is when it should have started. This is what we're going to tell the guests. This is when it should be finished. We're going to let the guests know if it's ahead or behind schedule. So we take the existing systems and we basically are making them more intelligent by communicating with each other upstream and downstream. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, okay, so that sounds to me then that you're probably sitting in between like an Olo and a QSR,
Exactly.
right? So you're you are almost like a synapse
Yeah.
that connects Olo and say a QSR automations, a KDS
Well, it's a
system.
feedback loop. It's a feedback
Okay.
loop. We
Okay.
sit in between, synapse feedback loop, but orders, events are coming in. Today, they're just stopping. It's stopping at the kitchen. And for the most part, the kitchen is being used as, it's a mechanism to fulfill orders. So do you have
Yeah.
staff looking at screens? It's telling them what to make. Um, there's a treasure trove of data in those events. And so what we are is we're the vehicle that creates the feedback loop all the way upstream into the digital ordering channel.
Hmm.
So you have that connection between what's happening in real time. So you know, the nice thing about our approach to it is there's no hardware, there's no big lift that is required for the brand, because we're doing that for them. We're basically taking all this data and we're making it intelligent and actionable and really streamlining the entire operation.
So, all right, you hit on something that I want to explore a little bit further. This treasure trove of data that's out there. Um, we had a conversation the other day about the bump bar,
Yeah.
which is like this, the dinosaur of technology inside of every restaurant, but yet plays such an incredibly critical role. The bump bar, and how this bump bar is kind of in some ways like a trigger,
Yep.
in many ways. But here's the thing: the bump bar is not necessarily always accurate because you have human beings that
Mhm.
are in control of when things get bumped. So explain to
Correct.
me about bumping behavior and bad bumping behavior and how that can actually screw up your entire restaurant data,
Yeah.
and really kind of wreak havoc on your promise times.
Yeah. Well, those bumps are the source of truth. That's what tells you how fast it's taking to make food.
Yeah.
So if it's not authentic, if you have staff pre-bumping, which means they're bumping a screen before their stage is completed, or they're not bumping, perhaps they let their ticket sit on the screen and dwell. They just don't bump it because they get busy. Or perhaps they step away, an expediter steps away from an expo and they come back and they mass bump. They clear several orders at once. So these are all the components that we have actually contemplated in what we call our store health. And
Hmm.
store health looks at the health of a kitchen to ensure that we're providing the teams with actionable data that pinpoints where these tendencies of using the KDS in the kitchen screens aren't as consistent as they should be. And so, you know, this kind of plays out because a lot of brands, including a lot of brands are relying on that ready event to inform a guest when to arrive.
Right.
They're relying on the duration of the ticket time to inform the guests when to show up. And so, it's really important to make sure that that data is consistent as possible. And you said it, you got human beings that these are not robots. Of course, you're going to have situations where a screen gets forgotten or gets bumped too soon. But what the value that we bring to the brands right out the gate before they even become a customer is we surface those inconsistencies for the brand in a way that's very actionable. We put it right up on a screen and we say, hey, at this location, your expediter is pre-bumping, X% of the time at this day part. So that's the feedback loop that if we can get that settled for the brand, not only is our service going to work smarter,
Yeah.
but you're going to be able to make more intelligent decisions around labor, menu changes, and so on, because, the speed of service data is authentic.
I love that. So you're actually providing a layer of insights into the kitchen operation, specifically as it relates to expedition, to expediting. You have these three different categories: pre-bumping, just getting stuff,
long
the
bumping.
long
Yep.
bumping, mass
Mass bump.
bumping.
Yeah.
These things are, if you can identify where that's happening and do that on a store by store basis, you give the operator an ability to send a GM or a DM. You
Yeah.
arm them with,
You're arming them. Well,
yeah,
and why, we came to this place because our service is pendant on a an accurate finish bump. That's when the order gets bumped at the expo. And what we were hearing, we heard from one of our customers at
yeah.
it's
Tell me
very
something about
specific
that.
locations that, customers are complaining that they're told that their order is ready. They get there and it's not ready yet. And so we started to really think through this, and we realized, for each of those orders, we had to troubleshoot, find out what the problem was. And we looked at all the events, we're getting all the events from these kitchen systems. And we found that there's no way you can't expedite or prepare an order in 2 seconds. So clearly, and what we found out with this brand is they were incentivizing their teams in this particular region. They were incentivizing them for speed of service. So the teams were basically cheating the system. Ticket times were appearing to be much shorter than what they were. Guests were arriving early. So that's when we went on this journey. And so, it's really important to know that it's one thing to surface the anomaly. It's to identify where these patterns are, but it's another thing entirely to make it actionable.
Yeah.
It's human beings in there. You can't say time out, guys. This is happening. Let's pause the restaurant and look at this. It has to be very simple. And so what we've created it's an alerting system that the brands can set. They can set the thresholds of what they consider pre-bumping, what they consider long bumping. And we have an alerting. It can go on the display. It can go on a mobile device or desktop, where when these thresholds are met, we send a message to that store manager or the operations lead to say, hey, at this location, we're drawing attention to the station or where that issue lies. And that's sort of the, to the extent that we can help action that, we're supporting continuous improvement. And that's really sort of the name of the game in restaurants. It's the more consistent the operation is, particularly in the kitchen, the better the guest experience is going to be, the better the food quality is going to be, and the more frequently that the guests are going to return.
I love that. Yeah. That combined with the fact that I think Curbit is also, because it's working with existing technologies that a restaurant has already invested in, it makes for an even better investment, because now you're truly maximizing the value of those of your tech ecosystem. Can you share, Scott, maybe a success story where Curbit made, a real measurable difference for the brand, and maybe you can frame that around some key metrics, maybe speed of service, guest sentiment, food dwell times. And I know
There's a lot of them.
This is the world that you live in.
Yeah.
But it would be really cool if you can illustrate for the audience, what are the metrics that Curbit really dives into, and what can restaurants expect as a benefit from working with you?
Yeah, I think that the two primary metrics are time saved. So we measure time saved by when was the guest told to arrive compared to when the ticket was actually completed. And so across all of our brands, we save an average of 4.5 minutes per order. So think about that. Think about the time saved if you're a delivery driver, if you're a guest, if you're a staff, somebody at the front of the house that's dealing with that level of inaccuracy. And when all of a sudden, we're facilitating those on-time arrivals. So 4.5, and we measure that improvement in our pilot. So in 30 days, we can show definitively what that level of improvement is from a current state to an improved state with Curbit. I think the best example from a KPI standpoint is the brand that we've worked with the longest, and that's Smashburger. We're in all the corporate Smashburger locations, 130 locations. They've been a tremendous partner of Curbit's. They've really invested in technology. And so what we measured, and we started with Smashburger in 2024. Year in 2024, we improved their repeat rates by the guest sentiment by 11%. And then we also improved the Google ratings by 7%. So those are lagging indicators. Okay. So the improvement in guest sentiment, improvement in ratings, and those are lagging indicators. In other words, you put a service in, and over time, as it improves, you're going to start to see that outcome, particularly with the ratings and the repeat rates.
Right.
So, in the case of Smashburger, we were able to realize that we put a system in place, and then by the end of the year, we saw a tangible improvement around guest sentiment and the Google rating. The Google ratings is an important one because that's sort of the magic line, the 4-star ratings. If you can get over 4 stars, now all of a sudden you become a trusted location for anybody that's looking to dine at your restaurant that's never been before. So we were able to achieve that for Smashburger. Very proud of that. So those are the sort of the data points that we're able to
But
influence.
what about like the pickup times, right? So, pickup time accuracy, let's call it that. One of the things that I know that you have spoken about in the past was this concept of a Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
What's the Goldilocks zone for an order pickup? And I love the name.
Yeah.
That's genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about where does a brand need to be from the promise time? You gave somebody a promise time.
Yeah.
How accurate does that need to be before you see?
I mean, perfect world, you're hitting the bullseye every time. You gave a promise, and that food is coming out at exactly the right time. And you're not missing at all. But that's obviously that's not feasible. These are, there's a human element here, but we want to facilitate accuracy to the extent we can as frequently as possible. So we've come up with what we've termed the Goldilocks zone. You don't want the guests coming in too late. You don't want them coming in too soon. You want it to be just right. And how we define that is we use the sentiment to drive what the Goldilocks zone is for the brand. And so we use sentiment differently than the true sentiment providers whom we partner with. But we just ask a simple question when we're piloting: if the experience was thumbs up, thumbs down. That's it. We're not looking to analyze the sentiment any deeper than that. And so what that does is we can look at where the negative sentiment starts to spike when those promise times, when the performance of the promise times start to fall off. And so we can define for the brand, based on that, the frequency of the negative sentiment, what the actual Goldilocks zone is. So we just went through this with a brand that we're in pilot yesterday, where we actually came to the conclusion that their Goldilocks zone is a promise time miss that's no less than 2.5 minutes, meaning you don't want to tell them to wait more than 2.5 minutes. If they wait longer than 2.5 minutes, they're pissed. But there's an acceptance for waiting 2 minutes. There's also an acceptance for a promise miss that is approximately 7 minutes on the plus side, meaning if the food has been sitting for approximately 7 minutes, they're okay with that. Okay. So that's our zone. We want to make sure that the accuracy of our promise time that we're measuring ourselves to is falling within that zone as frequently as possible. Now, other brands could be different. Some brands, it might be closer to plus or minus 2 minutes. But that's sort of the data-driven exercise that we go through when we engage with the brand. And we really want to put forward a service that translates to a more fulfilling experience for the guests, where they're going to provide that positive sentiment and return more frequently.
So when you're doing these pilot studies with potential clients, you must be seeing some pretty radical stuff with, where promise times might be on the nose in some locations, and in other locations, it's off the charts. Are you through this? Explain to me a little bit more about how your pilot study works and how complicated is it for a brand to work with you to get a pilot off the ground?
Yeah. Again, everything we do, we want to make it as easy for the operator as possible. We know that they got a million things that they're managing right now. So to the extent that we can take the load off their shoulders, we make it very simple. So first of all, it's just access to the data. We coordinate access to their KDS data, and then the online ordering provider and the point of sale. We pull all that data in, and then we show them the first thing we look at is the anomalies. We look at the frequency of how they're using their kitchen systems today, and we isolate where we need to see improvement. Then we look at the performance of their current promise times. So a lot of brands are using a quote time strategy where they're asking they're sharing the guests with the guests the time that their food will be ready at checkout. They sort of go into this black hole from checkout to handoff, hoping that they get to their food on time. There's not a lot of communication around any changes there. So what we do is we measure that. How is that performing? And then we measure what the improvement would look like if Curbit was not only managing those quote times dynamically, but also providing the user with updates along the way. So that exercise is profound. And I will say that anytime that we can get a brand into that exercise, we've converted them 100% of the time, because it really puts them in this position where you have a problem, that problem will continue to persist. You will be sending guests in early and having them wait, or you will be sending them in, later where their food has been sitting. And so we can show them definitively with data that this is the improvement. We're going to shrink this down. We're going to curate this experience so your guests are arriving in the Goldilock zone. And then we can move them into a split test. We can look at 3 locations with Curbit, 3 locations without, and we can start to measure the impact on sentiment. We can start to see that, okay, the guests are in the Curbit group. Not only is that timing improving, but the guests it's being reflected in the sentiment.
I got you. And typically when you're working with a new prospective client, and you're talking about getting a pilot study up and running. And I would imagine that, you guys are working with some pretty big brands right now. There's some heavy hitters, and I'm not sure if we can name names, but let's just say there's some heavy hitters out there that are using Curbit, and you're starting to develop a reputation for somebody that's really improving the overall service levels. Tell me about what might be a misconception that a brand might have about taking on, Curbit, as like new tech. Is there anything that you're coming across in your conversations with folks that like, I can't bring on another piece of technology. I just don't have the time, the energy, the space.
Yeah.
Tell me about how do you work with these guys?
Yeah.
Around that.
It's building trust. Really at the end of the day, it's, we're providing such a critical service for a restaurant brand. They can certainly pay their way through this and try and hire an army of people to try and fix it. But we have found, and you mentioned some of the brands, we've several brands they've tried to do this themselves, and it's just like, they come to us because they know that we can deliver on it immediately. It's building the trust with the brand. This is a new category. Kitchen capacity management is new. We're gonna start getting into conference season right now, and you're not going to see any booths around kitchen capacity management. There's not, you're going to see the traditional players in the space around point of sale and ordering. So it's important for us to create the awareness, first of all, to the industry. You've been a great help in that regard.
Thank you.
Amplifying what Curbit can do for the industry. But then when we get the opportunity to meet with the brand, understand their business challenges, it's going through this process. It's making them understand that we're not going to put a bunch of weight on their shoulders. We're actually removing the weight, and we're making their lives easier by going through a very straightforward process, showing it's data driven. The decision maker is going to be sticking their neck out for us. They're going to be making a buying decision based on the the impact that Curbit has. So it's really important that we make that decision maker shine and that we equip them with all this data that's driving these outcomes. You know, beyond that, once we get sort of these table stakes in, accurate promise times, dynamic throttling, data, the real-time feedback loop with the data. Once we get those table stakes in, what's really exciting for us is when we built the trust and now we can start to grow with the brand. That's not where Curbit stops. That's where we just begin. That's really just the starting line, is learning more about what the challenges are. Everything starts from the kitchen. And we're in a very unique position that we see 100% of the orders. We see all the systems that are feeding into it. So there's a lot of capabilities. There's a lot more features that we can bring into an operation that will support the brand's transformation into, the digital age.
Yeah. Scott, we touched on this a little bit earlier, and it's one of the things I want to make sure that people truly understand is that Curbit is in a lot of ways an enhancement to existing technology, right? I mean, maybe you can describe for the listeners some of your key partnerships that are really imperative to allow Curbit to do its thing inside of the restaurant.
Yeah. So some of the big ones. So I mentioned Olo earlier. We are a gold partner of Olo. We're part of their Connect program. So Olo has 400 partners. There's a select few, I believe it's 20 that are part of this Connect program. And so those have been sort of handpicked as the ones that really specialize in a gap that helps ensure that the Olo service works better. Yeah. So Olo is a great partner of ours. Not only have they brought us into their ecosystem, but because of the advancement of their APIs and the openness of their system, it's pretty much ham and eggs for us. I mean, we have the ability to send all this important data into their system in ways that, brands aren't using it. Other technology providers are not using it. So that's a very important relationship on the digital ordering side. On the kitchen side, QSR Automations is another partner of ours that we do. 65% of our customers are using QSR Automations. And it's because it's for similar reasons. It's the openness of their system. But we have this very unique ability with QSR to not only read data coming out, but we can write data into those systems. So a lot of important information that the kitchen staff might want to see. Drivers, a phone number for a guest, the guest's first name, their arrival status. If they text that they're here, patching data onto the screens, being able to patch a promise time onto those screens, the same information that we're sharing with the guest. Imagine being in the kitchen and having that direct connection with the guest. So guest and kitchen is in lockstep. So there's a lot of advanced features that you have with QSR Automations that really makes our service shine in that environment. And that really has become sort of a best in class when you have an Olo, a QSR Automation. There's a lot of great POS providers that we work with, Toast, PAR, NCR at the point of sale. So you're starting to see, from our standpoint, we're working with all these major enterprise systems,
right?
And we fill this very critical gap to make sure that those systems all work better together.
One of the things recently, you also developed a really interesting partnership with Epson. So in some ways, you're taking you're almost in an offline capacity through their printers. How's that going to work?
Yeah, that's a really exciting one. I keep mentioning enterprise. I mean, there's a whole other side to the market, and that's the SMB.
Yeah.
And so Epson has 85% market share in the restaurant space. I mean, their printers are everywhere. So Epson has recently launched a KDS. It's a lightweight system, cost effective, that effectively replaces a printer. So
Yeah.
it's very easy for a restaurant to swap out a printer and replace it with the KDS. Why is that important? Well, if you're printing receipts and you're fulfilling orders based off of physical tickets, you have no data. You have no digital events that says effectively when is that order finished.
Hmm.
So by replacing one of those printers with the KDS, not only is it going to tell the kitchen team what to make, but we're going to get that a very important event around when is the order finished. And so what we can do with that, I mean, we've all been to the food trucks. We've been to the little restaurants in downtown where, you order and it's, am I tethered to this location? Can I come and go? Now, all of a sudden, through our partnership with Epson, we're providing this important feedback loop again around the finish time. So we have become the communication channel for the restaurant to communicate with their guests. And we are also the feedback loop around the data that these brands don't have, these restaurants don't have, all the stuff that we talked about, the anomalies in the kitchen, the speed of service. It's hard to grow if you're a small business, if you don't have intelligent data to help you understand how do you become consistent.
Right.
So, entering into that space it's really important for us so we can help some of these smaller businesses grow into the enterprise. We want them to grow into these big brands that have capacity management problems that we're addressing today.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, we've been working with each other for a while now, and what's really cool about Curbit, so you guys have managed to develop these really incredible relationships across the restaurant tech space. I mean, your partners that you're dialed in with, that you have integrations with, are these are like the best in class across the board. And I think that in a lot of ways is kind of a testament to kitchen capacity management. Interestingly enough, we're not going to see kitchen capacity management on display at Mertech, in next week. But at the same time, you have these partnerships with these A-class, enterprise-grade technology companies that all see kitchen capacity management as being really an important area to be, and they're working with you. So on that note, I think that should set off some bells for some people, some of the restaurant brands, like, okay, this is an area that we're going to hear more about, we're going to see more about, because the way that we started the show, people still aren't getting their food on time. People are still walking into restaurants, crowding through the delivery drivers and everybody else that might be waiting for their food during, the busiest periods, or just points in time where maybe kitchens are understaffed, or for myriad reasons. Scott, before we go, let me throw you one curveball. Well, it's not a curveball, but I want to put you on. I want to put you on the spot a little bit. What's the most valuable lesson, Scott, that you've learned about scaling a startup in restaurant tech?
Yeah, it's resiliency.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard.
It's not for the faint of heart, huh?
It's not. Yeah. You got to have a high pain tolerance. And so, it's not just selling technology, it's running an operation, it's raising money. You've got teams of people that are dependent on you. In many ways, it's like this house of cards, and it's all on your shoulders to make sure that house of cards stabilizes into a foundation that can be built on and grow. And so you need to be resilient, because you're just getting your head beat in every day. And so, we learned that. I think that's something that it's probably more innate, you're kind of, you've developed that skill set over time, and that's brought you to the place that you are today. But that's what we pride ourselves. That's the culture we built at Curbit. It's reflected with Kevin, our CTO. He's our other co-founder. It's within our development team. It's working your ass off. It's not making excuses, and it's getting shit done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, baby. GSD. Hashtag GSD.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, this has been great, man. I'm gonna see you. I'll see you in Vegas. Oh, okay. You didn't tell your wife yet?
No. Yeah.
All right, pal.
All right.
Listen, this
Great
has
chatting
been,
with you.
yeah, great job. Thanks. We'll do this again. All right,
All righty.
be good.
Morning Sam, morning Ralph, make it